Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's your Wednesday going?
It's wonderful. We are back in my car in the parking lot of the WAC. It's like football season never ended.
And really, football season doesn't really ever end, because we talked to Ryan Day today in what was kind of billed as a season recap session, but it's on one hand, it was a season recap. On the other hand, it's like a season preview, which gives you an idea of, like, there's no really, this is the off season, but it's not really. It's just the next part of the season.
Right. There is no off season in college football at this point, other than maybe kind of in like June, like late
vacation times,
late May, early June. Yeah, that's about as off season-y as things get. And even now, that's a pretty busy part of the recruiting calendar. So yeah, college football, for a sport that's only played basically 3 months a year, it's pretty much a year-round sport at this point.
And Ohio State started their winter workouts this week, so don't tell the players that there's nothing going on, because they're waking up at 5 a.m. and hitting the gym at 6 a.m. and living this glorious life of professional college athletes. And you know what? I like it, because it goes from, like, we are 7 weeks away from spring opening, 6-7 weeks. And then you're into the spring game. And then, like, that's when you said, like, that's when things sort of, there's a chance to breathe, because the end of the season to the start of spring football is really, really quick.
Right. And it's a little bit more of a gap now, just because the recruiting has sort of been slid up mostly to December. So you don't have as much of that now in January, but, with players leaving, new coaches coming in, coaches who may or may not still be coaching in the NFL right now, who may be coming in a little bit. There's definitely still plenty of stuff to talk about. And this was a really fun, first of all, it was like 40 minutes, which is like, you never get 40 minutes with Ryan Day. We got 40 minutes or so with Ryan Day today. And it was just like, an estuary is the word that I kept thinking of. It's where, like the point where a freshwater river meets the sea, and there's like this blending of the seawater and the salt water. That's what this press conference was. It was like, here is the, hey, this kind of works out, because the 2019 stuff was still a little salty, but hey, there's the fresh 2020 stuff coming in. There's a little bit of a blending here, and we're swimming upstream towards 2020 now.
And he was trying to, let some of that salt go. And he said he was, after the game, he talked about being angry, and he said he's kind of let that go, but they haven't let it go. He's let the anger go. That's what he says. But clearly, the way the season ended, which he called a successful season, and it was, and if anybody says it wasn't, the rigidity of which they used to judge this season, I would hope they would apply to their lives as well. But this was a successful season, but it was clear. He told his coaches and his players to watch the national championship game, which I thought was very interesting. And he did the same thing. And he sent everybody home with, like, this lesson of, like, what are you going to do to get back there, to make this happen for yourselves next year? So it's clear that maybe the anger has dissipated, but the motivation is only growing.
Right. That reminded me a little bit of, when Jim Tressel changed the code to get into the WAC to 41-14 after the Florida National Championship game. You kind of are looking back, and you're just kind of remembering, but you're remembering and looking back with an eye towards the future.
And they said it was hard to watch. And then he was asked, how do you think you would have done against LSU? And he said it would have been fun. And you could just see it in his eyes, like, it would have been fun.
And, you look at that. Watching that game, it was like, yeah, there are some spots where Clemson did not match up with LSU that OSU probably would have matched up better. I sure would have loved to seen Sean Wade and Jeff Okudah and Damon Arnett out there against those LSU receivers, and maybe some things are not quite as wide open, and Jordan Fuller in the back, maybe some of those big plays don't turn into big plays. I mean, and a healthy J.K. Dobbins, what would a healthy J.K. Dobbins have looked like against that LSU defense?
And I think he would have kept them off the field pretty decently, as long as he didn't just bust a whole bunch. But let's start off, like you said, Day talked for almost 40 minutes, so there's a lot to cover. The most important thing we should cover is what he started off with, And that was by thanking the media for their professionalism across the board from beginning to end this past season.
Well, we mostly said nice things about him because things went pretty well. So that's we will. I'm sure he will appreciate his appreciation for our professionalism will track probably pretty closely with his winning percentage. So
that's true. So after the 2020 season, when we had this same press conference after a 9-3 season, he's going to be like, you guys are a little more professional last year, if I'm going to be honest. I could see that. And he would be, probably correct in saying that, because if they lose to Illinois,
Buffalo,
Bowling Green, there will be some, I wouldn't say lack of professionalism, just maybe extra professionalism.
Ryan, just 2 quickies. Number 1, what the heck, man?
How dare you?
How dare you, sir?
So, I've got a bunch of updates on the front page of the Ozone if you want to check those out if you haven't already. And there's video there that Tom posted as well. But just after basically it's just 50 questions from everybody in the room, and so there's all number of different things to talk about. So we can just go down this list a little bit. We've already talked about. The defense will remain the same in terms of the one high safety. I thought it was interesting that he said they'll diversify it some more with some 2 high stuff in 2020, but this is their defense. And as he's saying that, I'm wondering, after seeing Josh Proctor struggle a little bit as tackling, with the tackling as that last line of defense, I wondered if you're thinking well, maybe that's not how that's going to be what they do, but they might want to find something to add to it, because he needs to be better if he's going to be Jordan Fuller.
Right. And to have the focus that they did last year, where Jeff Hafley, just every time we asked Jeff Hafley what the number 1 goal of the defense was don't give up big plays, don't get torched, don't get hit over the top. If you have a Jordan Fuller back there, that makes that much easier, because if he's there, he's going to make that tackle. Well, Jordan Fuller is off to football Valhalla, and now that's either Josh Proctor or someone else in that safety spot has to be that caliber of player and be able to make the same kinds of plays that Jordan Fuller did. Because he was someone that 2 years ago, as a sophomore, we were talking about Jordan Fuller as this unsung hero of the defense, where it just kind of nothing was ever a problem. Yeah. And it was, the old Sherlock Holmes, the dog that doesn't bite. It wasn't that he was extraordinarily jumping off the film at you. It was just the stuff that wasn't happening was not happening as a result of him. And they have to find someone who can do that same thing in 2020.
Right. And I wrote this week about how Josh Proctor's ready to be a leader back there and ready to take over. But if he doesn't tackle as well as, say, Marcus Hooker, then I think it's the best tackler will play, or the smartest guy, the best tackler, the guy who, as you said, whoever doesn't give up those big plays. And if you're giving up you can give up the big play on a run just as easily as you can on a pass if you're the deep safety. And it's going to be the guy who doesn't allow those. That's going to be the starter. I still expect it to be Josh Proctor. And you don't want to be overly critical of him based on how he does against the number 2 team in the nation.
On a field that was halfway to an ice rink.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I don't know if you meant to say Marcus Hooker or Malik Hooker earlier.
I meant to say Marcus Hooker.
Okay.
Did I say Malik Hooker?
No, you said Marcus. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes. You wanted to make sure that I was correct?
Yeah, I mean, I love to... If we can start 2020 off with you being wrong about something, I'm halfway to my New Year's resolution of correcting you every single show.
At the time, we did start off 2020 by being correct about Clemson winning and beating Ohio State.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That was actually 2019.
That was 2019. Jeez. That's true.
So,
I was correct after watching that Clemson team play Ohio State. I was correct about the fact that they were probably not going to match up real well with LSU, because that was I came away from the Fiesta Bowl a lot less impressed with Clemson than I thought I would, and thinking, boy, this is probably the year to get Clemson, because they've taken a step back this year.
Yeah, and even going into that game, we talked to Matt Connolly of the State, covers Clemson, and he said he thought he saw LSU as 10 points better than either Ohio State or Clemson. He was wrong about Clemson because they were, 17?
17, yes.
So, but yeah, after that game against Clemson, as I just told you 20 minutes ago, Ohio State beats that team 7 out of 10 times. And we don't need to get back into it because, Tom, we're moving forward.
It's 2020.
We have moved forward. And moving forward, you mentioned new coaches. Corey Dennis has been hired, and Ryan Day was able to talk about him finally and spoke in glowing terms, even when he was kind of being grilled about, aren't you nervous because this guy's never done it before? You're like, don't you think it's kind of a gamble? And what he said is he's been attached, like Corey Dennis has been his right-hand man since he arrived at Ohio State. Like I think he even said even at the airport when they arrived, it was Corey Dennis there. So this is a guy who teaches it. He said he'll teach it the way he wants it taught. The continuity was a big thing as well. And right now, Corey Dennis looks like he's in Columbus for the long haul. What that means, I don't know. The long haul anymore is 4 years.
12 months.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's got a young family. He's obviously based here. He's Urban Meyer's son-in-law. There's that whole thing. He's not a coordinator or anything. He's just a quote unquote, just a quarterback's coach. But look at Joe Brady and see how quickly things can change if you get all of this attention. But he wants that continuity. That's what Corey Dennis brings, and that's what it will continue to be because he doesn't foresee him leaving anytime soon.
Right. And having a guy who has ties to the area like Corey Dennis does, that certainly encourages him to stay here a little longer. And, if a year from now you're getting offered the offensive coordinator position at Bowling Green or Ohio University or something, like, staying in Columbus might be appealing enough that you stick around for a couple extra years. And then, if and when, say, Kevin Wilson goes and gets a head coaching job somewhere 3 years from now, then maybe Corey Dennis becomes the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, or Brian Hartline does, or whoever it is. You have the turnover on the Ohio State coaching staff is a negative in some ways, but it's a positive in that there's always something opening up. As long as Ohio State continues to produce the results it has, there's always going to be a little bit of churn on that coaching staff, which means new opportunities opening up for guys to move up that ladder.
And Day did say that he wanted Mike Yurcich to stay because he doesn't want coaches leaving after 1 year. There's been talk that it was kind of amicable, or just both sides were okay with him leaving. Day said, no, I wanted him back, and, believe what you want there. But when, on signing day back in December, when Day is talking about Mike Yurcich teaching C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller and not wanting to answer the question about Corey Dennis going to Colorado State, laughing because everybody knows it's happening. It's pretty clear at that point that he expected Yurcich to be back, at least in the way he was talking, and certainly in his actions regarding Corey Dennis and going to Colorado State.
Yeah, and he said Corey Dennis at one point, it sounded like, was actually in Colorado or like on his way to Colorado, and then when Yurcich left and the position opened up, it was like, all right, turn around, go back to Columbus. Yep. And he mentioned just the pay increase that Yurcich got at Texas, which that may have been the offer you can't refuse. I'm sure that when we talked to him in December, it was very clear that yes, Corey Dennis is going. Like Ryan Day basically said, like, is that official yet? Like, is it? Which he would have a pretty good idea that something was in the works. So yeah, that seems like it was not necessarily planned out at that time, because he had said he didn't expect to lose anyone else off that coaching staff at that point. And
he also then said today that he didn't really put a lot of thought into it. It was Corey Dennis, all the way. Once Yurcich left, it was like, well, this is the guy who has been here since I've been here, and they've worked together. So obviously he has this experience working with him. Now, breaking news here, Tom, if he didn't think he was capable of doing the job, he's not going to pay him to do the job.
That seems like an important point to raise.
I'm just saying.
And he was specifically asked, jumping a QC coach, a quality control coach, to a full-time position, 10 assistant kind of, the 10 official assistants kind of position. is that something he'd consider doing at other positions? She said, yeah, but the fact that Ryan Day also kind of has a finger in the pot with the quarterbacks, where he's not in every single quarterback meeting, but he's in enough that he can kind of keep his finger on the pulse of what's going on in there in a way he can't necessarily do with, say, the linebackers or the safeties or even the running backs. So that makes that a little easier. But, he literally, as long as Ryan Day has been in Columbus, Corey Dennis has been there with him. He knows what he's getting out of this. There were some concerns about recruiting and that kind of stuff expressed, and how will Corey Dennis do on the trail? Ryan Day has a pretty good sense for what makes a good recruiter, and he knows Corey Dennis personally well enough that he can he has a much better sense of the answer to that question than anyone outside of this building.
Yeah, there was seemingly no concerns there, and what an interesting thing is he also talked about when you have a young coach like this, everything you invest in him, you get back. And that's not the same thing with a veteran coach. And almost, and then he also talked about he teaches it the way we want it taught, the way I want it taught. And it felt like he was saying Mike Yurcich wasn't doing that. But then later on it was asked, so are you saying Mike Yurcich was not doing that? He's like, no, I loved what, Mike brought to the offense because, sometimes it's good to have different perspectives, but he taught what we wanted to teach. And it was like, it sure seemed like what you were just saying was as much about the guy who is no longer here as the guy who you're bringing in.
And that's one of those things where it's like, you can read as much or as little into this conversation or this comment as you want to, and then you get into, okay, he said very explicitly he wants to keep him here. He wanted Yurcich to stay. There's also this sort of code within the coaching community. You don't really talk bad about other assistants. So, your mileage may vary on where in that, where in that spectrum those couple different elements fall.
And I'm not sure if I mentioned this. Day declined to get into any names of defensive assistants who may or may not be hired down the road.
I mean, literally, it could be anyone. It could be Kerry Combs. It could be the guy who was here about 3-4 years ago who coached the defensive backs.
Yeah. Could be the guy who replaced Bill Sheridan as cornerbacks coach at Ohio State and Urban Meyer's first staff.
Could be, let's see, who was here before Taver Johnson?
That guy.
Is that the same guy? Oh, well, I mean...
literally anybody.
It could be literally anybody. And nothing's official until it's official, but, we were joking on the way out that we were going to look for parking spots painted with the names of coaches who may not officially be here yet, because it seems like it's as official as it could get, because normally you hear a bunch of different names bandied about if there's still some uncertainty. Ryan Day did not seem particularly panicked about the fact that... No. The final signing day is 2 weeks away now? 3 weeks away now? 3 weeks away now, and he has not yet filled that position.
That's strange.
It seemed interesting to me that he did not seem like there was any urgency. Do you think Ryan Day doesn't know when the second signing day is? Could that be the issue?
That could be the issue. Maybe he just thinks like last year was really good on defense, so
it'll be fine.
It'll be fine. It'll work itself out.
Take a year off, you guys. Yeah. It'll be fine.
Past head coaches have worked with 9 assistants and done just fine.
That's true.
So
Jim Tressel worked with 8 a few years.
That's good, Tom. That's really good. Has nothing to do with Corey Dennis.
No. Nope. Sure doesn't.
So, just looking through here. Ryan Day, the obligatory Joe Burrow questions. Congratulations to Joe Burrow. They called him up and said, good job. Hey, Tom, did you happen to see Odell Beckham Jr. handing out wads of cash to the LSU players after the game?
I have been reliably informed that was not real money. So I think it's fine. I don't think anything needs to. Any conversation
did you then see earlier on Wednesday when Joe Burrow said, no, it was real money?
So my assumption then would be that he was handing out fake money to all the players who had remaining eligibility, but real money to the players who were who had exhausted their eligibility.
Correct. And then when an LSU spokesperson said that it was fake money that he was handing out. I assume he just meant fake money to the guys with eligibility. And there just wasn't, you can't convey a lot of stuff in a tweet.
Right. And Joe Burrow is no longer his responsibility as he has exhausted his eligibility. So therefore, the people who fell under his dominion, I mean, because the only other possible explanation is that they're, the mechanisms there are so used to lying about the distribution of cash payments but I mean, that would be, that's certainly not a road we would want to walk.
That is not the SEC football that I want to exist in my world. So no. Anything, gosh, there's just so much time. I don't even know where to continue. Kevin Wilson will be, said he'll be more involved in the play calling. And not that, I mean, they've, as he said, since he's gotten here, him and Kevin Wilson have, been attached and everything. And they'll be, maybe allow him to call some more plays just on his own so it frees up Ryan Day. There'll be times where Ryan Day's like, you know what, take this quarter. I'm tired. I'm going to go get a hot dog. And
we're up 50-0 on Buffalo. It's not even halftime yet. Like, let's just, I'm going to go call some recruits.
Do some FaceTiming. Can you FaceTime from the sideline of a game?
Depends on the in-stadium Wi-Fi.
Oh, well, maybe that's why they boosted it at Ohio Stadium.
There you go. I was wondering. Because it certainly wasn't for our benefit.
No. Ryan Day talked about the return of Shaun Wade, which he compared it to the return of Damon Arnett last year. I think it's a little bit bigger than that because 1 of 4 is better than 0 of 4.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is one of these conversations we'll have a bunch of times between now and now and late August, but there are certain position groups where it's more important to have returning starters than others. Quarterback is the one that's obvious. Like, a new quarterback can create issues that first year as there's sort of a learning curve and an adjustment to the guy. Defensive backs are one of those areas where if you don't have returning production, like, you can have a real steep drop off because it's not going to be nearly as steep now that Shaun Wade is back. But the 2020 Ohio State defense, I think I can feel pretty comfortable in saying, is not going to be as good against the pass as the 2019 one is. And there's a whole bunch of different reasons for that. One is the loss of Chase Young, but also Jeff Okudah, Damon Arnett, Jordan Fuller. There is going to be a drop off there, but the return of Shaun Wade kind of puts a floor underneath it where you're not falling down an elevator shaft, or if you are, you're falling under the top of the elevator, which is only a couple stories below where you are. It's not great, but that was, one of the other ones is offensive line, and they got 3 guys back there that could have left early too. So there are a couple positions, one on each side of the ball, where it's like, oh, that is huge to get those guys back.
And as Day said, the guys in the secondary have all played. Seven Banks and Cameron Brown and Josh Proctor. Those guys have played almost in every game and have been at times playing starters minutes because of be it injury or the times they would have 2 safeties and Josh Proctor would be the deep safety and Jordan Fuller would come in and be closer to the line of scrimmage, or they'd have 2 deep safeties. So these guys have all played like real serious minutes, but now they have to be the guy. And the concern that I would have, and as we'll get into this 1,000 times, like you said, is who's behind them,
right?
And who are they next year? Because they were necessary this year. Is there a them next year, to use a lot of theys and thems and these?
A lot of really vague pronouns.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. You've got kind of some younger guys coming in, but this is where Jordan Battle not signing in 2019,
that's huge.
This is when you start to feel that impact. This is like when a program loses scholarships and you start to see it a year or 2 later on the offensive line. Like, you don't have those positions that take a couple of years to develop. It takes a couple of years for it to catch up with you. Not signing a corner in 2019, this is when that could start to catch up with you 2020, 2021, when that guy is potentially, a sophomore, junior kind of impact player.
Yeah, and it's still bizarre that they did not sign anybody in 2019. Even just going with one guy and knowing the entire time that we're probably going to lose him. But then, you can't, sometimes you don't want to like reach on guys. It's like, it's better to get nobody than to get a guy who can't play, and then you just figure we'll make up for it down the road. or, you still have, they did some red shirting, so that helped. And you can put a Band-Aid on it, but it has to be, that wound better stay closed. And if it opens up, then, good luck with that. But they've got players that I think they'll be fine with. It's just, is there the depth that they need? And, that you could ask the same thing of the defensive line, and we'll get into all of that. Tom, we have an off season. I know we said there is no off season. There is definitely an off season for podcasting.
There's a slightly less than full mid-season at least, and there's a lot of it coming up. So
preview season. There's yes. We won't even get into recap season. Day was asked about the what are you going to do about the receivers? Who are you going to put in the slot? And he said, well, rank the top 6 receivers, and then figure it out from there. The quicker guys, the quicker change of direction guys will probably be inside. What I got from what he said is basically you're going to see sometimes Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson inside, and people are going to be moving around, and there may not necessarily be a KJ Hill. I think we've seen Austin Mack did some of the slot. You see what Clemson does where different guys move in and out of the slot. You see, look at the Saints with Michael Thomas. Half of his catches come out of the slot, and he's an X. So there are things where it's, how Chris Holtmann has positionless basketball.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I'm wondering if we're moving to positionless receivers, because even back in Zach Smith's day, you teach everybody everything, but there were still certain guys that did this, did that. And Brian Hartline will teach everybody everything. I just wonder if maybe they're going more towards the positionless thing.
Right. Yeah. Where for Chris Holtmann, you don't have a 5 anymore. It's just, we have a guy who sort of does some of the stuff that a 5 used to do, but he also does other stuff because flexibility is important because you're facing a bunch of different kinds of opponents and defenses. With the wide receivers, there has always been overlap. You kind of had guys who fit certain roles where the slot guy was a little shorter and a little shiftier. And then, you had the 6'5" guy who was like Benjamin Victor, who was the X, and he was the guy who was the, kind of the possession receiver, the big guy, jump ball, fade, throw the fade to him kind of guy. And then you had the Z guy who was, Devin Smith, go run that 9 route and catch it 40 yards downfield because you're the fast guy. They have guys who are short and shifty, but also fast, and they have some tall guys who are also pretty fast. So, the X and the Z last year, we were sort of conditioned to think of those as a little bit kind of separate things. This was not kind of like the linebackers where they treat the Mike and the Will as functionally the same position. We were sort of used to thinking of the X and the Z and the H as kind of completely separate buckets. And the distinction, the line between those positions has definitely blurred over the last couple of years. And that's, that's reflective of, it allows you to be much more flexible and to, attack different teams in different ways. And, sometimes if the opposition has, 3 really short corners, it might be beneficial to have 3 tall receivers out there or 2 tall receivers out there at the same time. If the other team might have tall guys who are not quite as quick and fluid, maybe you put some of those shorter, shiftier guys out there who are a little quicker and attack them that way. If you're not in a specific bucket, a specific role where it's I only know how to do this, where you can kind of cross-train them to different positions, it gives you so much more flexibility in terms of how you attack people.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing what that top 6 looks like, and maybe that's something we'll talk about down the road, because I don't, it's Chris Olave, it's Garrett Wilson, and then who,
Yeah, he was asked about Jalen Gill kind of being the top returner at H, and CJ Saunders. Is CJ Saunders coming back? He's applied for a 6th year. I don't know if we've heard officially that he's gotten it yet, but
I did. He had his. I saw a picture of him with his jersey framed, and usually that's like a
that's
so
it.
long.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
He could get a 6th year and have it at Ohio State. He could get a 6th year and have it somewhere else, or he could not get a 6th year.
And it's weird because they're weird. I don't know. There's a lot of young guys. There would be value in having him back, but I don't. Do they bring him back if he gets that 6th year? Is there room for him? Is this one of those things where you always welcome a 5th or 6th year guy back, especially in a room this young.
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly something to wanting that kind of leadership in that room where KJ Hill was kind of the carryover guy. Mm-hmm. You had KJ Hill and Benjamin Victor and Austin Mack last year. Those were all seniors. KJ Hill coming back for that last year. That's a big deal when you've got such a young room. And, Garrett Wilson now feels like, he's been, it feels like we've been talking about Garrett Wilson for quite a while. Garrett Wilson's he's only been here a year.
He's still got 2 more years.
Yeah. And Chris Olave is, it certainly seems like he is poised to be the leader in that room. He's only going into his 3rd year. I mean, he's only really been, an active part of the team and kind of a household name for about 14 months now. I mean, it's crazy how fast these guys' careers go. But yeah, I mean, there is certainly a place for that veteran leadership in that room. And, to be the guy who was here when Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon were here. And here's how those guys did it. Mm-hmm. And, those guys were the guys who were here when Michael Thomas was here. And, it's like, the oral traditions of these past civilizations, like it gets, from knowledge and institutional knowledge gets passed down from Michael Thomas to Paris Campbell.
All the way back to Reggie Germany and Kenyon Rambo.
It was institutional. It was a different kind of institutional back then, yes.
Ryan Day said Chris Olave didn't eat solid food for like 3 or 4 days after the game. You just feel bad for that kid.
I was glad someone asked about that. That was one of the things I thought maybe we'll ask about how he's doing, because he's a really good kid, like a really, really good kid. And it just like the last person you would want that to fall on.
Who would you want it to fall on, Tom?
Nico Collins. Chris Olave is someone who has just done everything right. And he's someone who gets singled out as the person who does everything right and does things the right way since he got here. I mean, since before he was playing, when they brought him out as an interview subject, because he was the guy who was doing things right. He's practicing right, handling himself the right way. He has just been like this role model for Ohio State receivers since, partway through his freshman year. That's a tough position for him to be in. And, it sounds like he's, maybe it's a little less painful every day. But yeah, Day literally said he didn't think he ate solid food for 3 or 4 days after that. And that's tough, but that's also the kind of thing that, that can either eat you alive or that can fuel you. And, they are very big on sports psychology, within the program. And, I think they're probably pretty well positioned to make sure that energy gets channeled in a positive direction instead of a negative one for him.
Do you think when Day said, hey, I want you all to watch the national championship game, was it like, except for you, Chris?
Yeah.
You've been through enough.
Come here and give me a hug. Yeah. He's going to be someone who's going to be such an interesting story this year, because, it's going to be a thing. It's going to be a thing. And, you don't want it to get, too over the top and too repetitive. But, that can be a story where, if he, it reminds me a little bit of the Isaiah Prince game against Penn State in 2016, where 2017, Isaiah Prince had this nightmarish game. It wasn't even like Chris Olave, where just like one play, one moment. He just had a very tough game and got a lot of criticism on social media. Came back that next year, improved. It fueled him. He learned from it. It really fired him up, got him focused, and he played so much better that next year. And they have that dramatic comeback win against Penn State, and he's just sobbing after the game because it just meant so much.
I remember taking a picture of that.
One of us did. You got credit for it. That I remember. It was, but that was like an example of the positive way you can kind of channel that energy. You're not like moping about it. Mm-hmm. You're kind of focusing and moving forward and using it to fuel you.
Yeah, like when Paris Campbell, 2015 season opener, like second play or third play, drops a sure touchdown pass on a slant, and he would have nightmares about that for the next probably 2 years. Didn't have a catch that entire season. Started in maybe 3 games, including that season opener. This is kind of a different level with the Chris Olave thing, but there are certainly plays like that fuel you, and I'm sure that one will he'll internalize it the right way rather than just allowing it to eat him alive. Like you said, there are plenty of sports psychologists on staff, and that's not even counting like Mick and Ryan Day and Brian Hartline. But we talked about young receivers. Day also talked about the young group of running backs. And he was asked, what does Master Teague need to do to be that guy? And he's like, I don't know. I don't know what he needs to do. But what he wants to see is something that they didn't get a chance to see last year, which is early in the game, big moments. How do you perform? What can you do? And I think for me, the only time we got to see that is Clemson, and it made me question what they will do this season, because before that, clearly Master Teague was going to be the starter this season. After seeing what little he did, I would say, against Clemson, now you're like, well, now maybe now there's room for somebody else. But again, this was at that point the top rush defense in the nation, or top 4. So yeah, but then again, like J.K. Dobbins sure made them look soft, and you're like, well, why can't Master Teague do more? So I wrote today, I think it's completely up for grabs. He's the guy you assume is going to win a job, but I don't think he can just win it by default.
Right. And yeah, I think we probably both came into the Fiesta Bowl assuming, yep, he's the every down back next year, and came out of the Fiesta Bowl going, well, maybe there are situations where they need someone else to be that guy. And I mean, the good news is there are other guys in that room that are potentially ready to be that guy, or who are guys whose skill sets complement Teague's.
Exactly.
Where, Teague can kind of be that battering ram, and maybe you have the speed guy too. Now, Teague is, sorry, I should rephrase. Teague is someone who Tony Alford mentioned as potentially the fastest guy in that room. So it's not a speed thing. Maybe it's more of like a shiftiness, or like Teague has that straight line speed. Maybe you have someone else who's, maybe it's a vision thing. Maybe it's a shiftiness thing. And maybe that's something that he can, work to develop. Because I'm sure I have a pretty good feeling that if we have noticed that could be a potential issue for him, that Tony Alford and he probably have also noticed
Perhaps.
that. So,
or now they'll know it from listening to the show.
Yeah. I don't know. Does Tony Alford listen to the show? Maybe.
Well, I assume it's on.
Yeah. So, that's true. Yeah. They're not playing It's Time for War anymore, so it must be.
Gotta be playing something.
So yeah, he's someone who could be that guy. I'm a little less confident that he could be that guy. He will necessarily automatically be that guy this year than I was before the Fiesta Bowl. But I mean, it was something somewhat telling. Like that was the first place that Ryan Day mentioned when he was asked, positions of potential concern for this coming year. That was last year. That was the first place whenever someone asked him something, like what's going well in fall camp, it was always J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah.
Now, replacing J.K. Dobbins is the first thing that comes out of his mouth when he saw him out potential concerns for 2020.
Well, and J.K. Dobbins was the third highest Heisman finalist among the Buckeyes, but to me, he was the MVP. Justin Fields had crazy numbers. Chase Young was maybe the best player in the country, but J.K. Dobbins was the most consistent guy in the biggest games, the biggest moments. And, I cannot be talked out of that, Tom. I am sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's less indefensible than some of your other opinions. So that's fine. That's that's as good as it's going to get, I guess.
That's true. Anything else from Day today that you wanted to mention?
He was asked about Justin Fields and the status of his knee. As with all things medical, he didn't want to go into great specifics. He said he wasn't 100% for the Fiesta Bowl, which I think you probably noticed if you were watching on TV. But he was asked, looking back, what the initial injury at the end of that Penn State game, do you question, should they have done something differently in that position? And Day said no, he'd do it again the same way. It was a pass. He rolled out. He happened to get hit in a way that hurt that knee. It sounded like he missed some practice in the lead up to the Big Ten championship game, which, and he said, if you're Aaron Rodgers and you've been a quarterback for years and years and years and, a decade in Green Bay or however long he's been there, missing a week of practice is not that big a deal. When you're a college player, especially a first year starter in your first year at the program, missing time in practice can make a much bigger impact on you, just because you don't have the just accumulated institutional knowledge.
And look at the way they started in the Big Ten championship
and
game.
they came out of the gates real slowly in the Big Ten championship game, and there's the kind of cumulative fatigue thing that probably added into that as well. But this is the second time in 2 Big Ten championship games against Wisconsin where Ohio State has had a quarterback that came in with a knee injury and didn't get the decisive win over Wisconsin that they really needed to.
So are you saying they should have started?
I would have started Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow?
Yeah. I would have started Joe Burrow.
That was a mistake by Ryan Day. You think you would learn from the mistakes of people before you, but he did not.
He did not.
He went with Justin Fields instead of Joe Burrow.
Do you regret not starting Joe Burrow in the 2019 Big Ten championship game? Yes or no?
That would have been a good question, because that's what people want to know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have regrets that you were so stupid that you played your quarterback instead of somebody else's?
Yeah. And that's there's so many. Every time I think about the Joe Burrow thing, it's incredible all the different spots where that story could have turned out differently. And if he doesn't break his hand in fall camp in 2017, then he's potentially the backup, and then Dwayne Haskins transfers to Maryland or something and throws for 5,000 yards, and everyone's kicking and screaming about the fact that why did you let Dwayne Haskins get away for Joe Burrow? Yeah,
well, yeah, Tom. I mean, what do you want me to say? They made a mistake no matter what they did. There was going to be no right answer, even though they've only had the 2 greatest seasons of quarterback play in school history in back-to-back years with 2 different guys.
Yeah, 2 different guys, 2 different
styles,
kind of offensive coaching staff. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. Ryan Day said this will be the first time in like 8 years he's had a quarterback for a second year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, when you look at what he's done and producing all of these different quarterbacks, I'm watching him and I'm thinking, I think maybe Ohio State got the right guy.
Oh, you think so, Doctor?
I think
Do ya?
so. I don't think this is Larry Coker. I don't think this is...
Yeah, because Larry Coker won a championship
Gene
his first
Chizik.
year.
There you go. That is true. Yes, he's not done yet. But
I know we're trying to wrap up, but I just want to leave people with one thought. Think about what Joe Burrow looked like his first season in a system, and then what Joe Burrow looked like his second season in the system.
Geez.
Justin Fields just had his first year. Justin Fields' first year was better than Joe Burrow's. I don't anticipate the exponential leap that Joe Burrow made, but this has long been one of my axioms with transfer quarterbacks. Like, the first year is going to be okay, and the second year is when potentially you take a leap, unless you're playing for Jim Harbaugh, in which case you sort of slide gently downhill.
Year one's the year you want to do it.
You want to get it before your brain is all polluted and full of flies. I
got fly brain.
That second year is where you kind of take a step. Justin Fields had 40-something touchdowns and 3 interceptions as a sophomore.
2 in the last game, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you take even a little bit of a step forward from that, and 2020 might be a fun year in Columbus.
Now, I do expect, and again, there's plenty of time to talk about this, and we are wrapping up. Trevor Lawrence threw a bunch of interceptions earlier in the season this year because he was being given more rope. He's given more room to do stuff and figuring things out. And I think maybe we might see some of that with Justin Fields, where there's some time early in the season where, go ahead and see, because it's not going to cost us. Go ahead and do what you want to do, and then you learn from it. And you saw, Trevor Lawrence, no interceptions until that last one over the course of his last 8 games. So there's maybe some of the numbers will be a little different, but overall, what he is, and Ryan Day said they're going to talk, he'll sit down with Justin Fields and Corey Dennis about what they expect from him or what could be coming in 2020. And he said, they'll want to see more leadership, but where he can go from this point with a healthy knee, and there's no concerns there that he's going to be fine there. I mean, it's going to be the greatest quarterback season in Ohio State history, provided he is healthy. I'm not saying 5,000 yards because that's not, he'll be running more. But you could see, 4,000 yards, 500 yards rushing. I mean, I think that's very possible. If they have the offensive line that I think we both think they could have in the coming year,
the wide receiver core continues to develop in the way that I think we both think it could continue to develop.
Plus, not going to be able to run the ball.
You're going to have, I mean, they're probably not going to have a 2,000-yard rusher this year. That yardage is going to come from somewhere because, as we have seen with Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson, there is going to be yardage. There are going to be points.
The ball is going to keep going forward, and it's just, are you running it or throwing it?
Yeah, this is going to look a little different than it did last year, but should still be pretty fun and pretty explosive.
Yeah, pay attention. Watch it.
Yeah,
enjoy it.
Ohio State football. Consider watching.
I think that'll do it. Are you set? Are you good?
I'm good.
It was a full day. It was a lot of information. We'll be cranking out stories from this. Next week, we will talk to Mickey Marotti, head strength coach, on Wednesday, and we'll do something afterwards, and we'll tell you like who's running the 4.3s. How many times is Josh Myers doing 225? I'm sure we're going to get all of that information.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they'll be real generous with sharing all of the specifics on strength and all of that.
You know what? This is our chance to ask injury questions. Maybe Mick doesn't know, like you're not supposed to talk about injuries because this is his whole life. This is his one chance every 3 years to talk to us. I'm sure he's going to be like, he'll go overboard in telling us stuff.
Yeah, and probably like game plan stuff too. Like just he's heard guys talking. Yeah, I'm sure he'll have
another thing, guys. Let me mention this. But yeah, so that will do it. Thank you all for listening. Make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network. Mondays and Fridays with the Buckeye Sleepcast. Tuesdays with Silver Bullets. Wednesdays probably us. Like we might be in a routine now at this point.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to get Mick Marotti next Wednesday. We have, I think, then a week off in the middle. We'll do a show, and then the week after that.
See if we can't get somebody else that week, though. Yeah. I'll talk to Ohio State, see what we can do.
Yeah, we know people.
We know people, and then the week after that is really the huge week, signing day.
Signing day.
We'll be talking to Corey Dennis, a defensive assistant coach to be hired to be named later. Nobody knows. Yeah, that's going to be a huge surprise.
They're still combing through resumes. It could be literally anyone.
And then we also get to talk to the 14, possibly 15 early enrollees. The 15th being a walk-on tight end from SMU, whose name acceptably escapes me right now.
It's definitely someone.
Maybe it's the defensive coordinator.
Oh, man. Kerry Combs, grad transfer tight end.
So that'll do it. Thank you all for listening. If you want to get the ad-free versions of this show and some bonus content, check out, consider supporting us at patreon.com/Buckeye Weekly. We are there, and always theozone.net. Read that because we need that as well. Thanks. Talk to you guys later.